Have you ever wanted to create a branding identity from scratch, but you don't know where to begin or how you go about that process? Well, in today's video, I'm going to make up a simple brief for myself that I'm going to transform into a full branding identity. So creating mock briefs is a great way to have fun, to practice your skills, and also to get clients as well. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. So I've been vegan for about 4 years now, so I thought I would do a vegan cheese brand. I already have a name for the brand, and it will be Cheddar, which I quite like because it's quite simple, it's got a nod to cheese itself, and I think it will fit in nicely with a plant-based alternative. Now, if you're making up a brand to create and you've not done like a mock brief or a passion project before, I'd suggest that you spend very little time on the actual creation of the name. Obviously it's important, but you will be given this from a real client in a real project, so I would spend as little time as possible and just don't let it be an obstacle in your way when you're getting on with the process. So in terms of the brief that I've set for myself, Cheddar is a small vegan business that creates plant-based cheese, and they've tasked me to create a visual identity for them as well as a packaging design for their very first cheese product. Now they want it to be fun, playful, but they want it to pack a punch like their cheese. And they also want me to incorporate sort of an ironic twist or a funny twist on the perception of plant-based dairy products. So along with the brief, we now need to establish as the designer what we need to deliver at the end of the project. So the deliverables are a logo, a submark, a colour palette, a pattern, and also a product packaging for their very first product. A great way to start any branding project is to do a bit of competitor analysis and do a bit of research on that before you get started. I feel like this is really important to do because it gives you a clearer sense on how you can separate your own brand from competing brands that already exist. So in order to do this, I've been on Pinterest and I've compiled a bunch of images from dairy-free / vegan cheese brands that will compete with my own brand. So I've just plopped them all onto this Millernote board, which acts as like a mind map or a mood board, and I've gone around and left a note on each just to say which bits I like and which bits I don't like of each brand. And a good thing to do, especially if you're working with a real client, is to dive quite deep into these other brands just because you want to see where they situate themselves, and that will give you a clearer picture on how you can really separate yourself from each one. Now that I've analysed the competitors, I like to create my own mood board which will serve as the basis for the vibe that I'm going for with my own brand. So once again, I have collated a bunch of images from Pinterest, and as you can see, I'm really leaning towards this sort of custom type look. And as per the brief, I think this will lend itself nicely to having that playful and fun feeling because I can really customize a type to sort of reflect that rather than just using sort of like a methodical, already built typeface. And I really like some of the textures that are within some of these pieces as well, which I may bring into my own brand. So just to recap at this point, I've looked at the competitors of the brand and I've also done my own mood board. So I have a pretty good idea of the vibe that I'm going for this brand. So it's now time to start building the logo type, which I'm going to use the iPad and Procreate for just to sketch it out. So let's head over there now. So the first decision that I need to make before I crack on with sketching out this logo type is to decide whether I have a visual idea for the design already and run with that, or to use a pre-existing typeface as a base for my letters and customize that in my own way. If I've got a bit of a creative block, then I'll experiment with the latter and take a look at existing fonts that have the bare bones feel of what I'm trying to portray. I have one in mind, so I'm going to go for the latter. So the font I have in mind is by Kern Club, and it's called Uppercut. This font is quite funky and has a mix of proportional and stretched letter forms. And the first thing I'm going to do is just trace over the font layer using a pencil brush so that I can customize each letter if I need to on its own layer. I was sort of imagining how I could potentially play on melted cheese and a cheese pull with this design, but at this stage it's all about experimenting and see what works while still referring back to the brief. And that's sort of why I've chosen this font, because it's quite playful, it's still quite bold, but it's still got a lot of character to it as well. Now that I've traced over this font, the other idea that I had for customizing this logo type was to bring the stretch letters in and just take little chunks of holes out of each letter like you would see on certain types of cheese. I feel like the mix of stretched and proportional letter forms was a bit too much for the brand, so I'm bringing in the stretched letters to being somewhat proportional, and I'm going to go for the cheese hole effect. I think this will add enough character to the logo without making it too complex, but enough to give it a unique character. So I know a lot of people use this custom type method and manipulate it within sort of Illustrator itself just by using a pencil tool or the pen tool. But I've always enjoyed the intuitive and analog feel of using my Apple Pencil and sort of just vectorizing it afterwards in Illustrator. Now if you don't have an iPad or an Apple Pencil or anything like that, you can just go sort of bare bones and use just a standard pencil and paper. Or you can do it in Illustrator itself like I said, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube to sort of show you how this is done. I'm also going to round out any corners because I just think that that relates to the soft nature of cheese. I'm just going to experiment with the kerning of the letters. I want to bring them in so they're quite close and tight together, but I don't want it to become hard to read, especially at a distance. So I'm quite liking how this is starting to feel now. Obviously this is a world away from what we started with, and as much as that wasn't what I initially planned, it's okay to end up with something that is not what you expected. But this is good for a base to start and add some unique character to it, so I'm going to start and add a few details in, including this droopy sort of melty effect that you can see on the H. I'm quite happy with this now, so I'm going to go ahead and start punching holes out the edges of each letter to give me that particular sort of cheese hole effect that I was after, that I mentioned earlier on. And that's it. I'm pleased with how this final sketch is looking, and I feel this suits the vibe I'm going for with this brand. So now I'm going to bring this into Illustrator and vectorize this so I can continue with the process. So now that I can crack on in Illustrator, I'm thinking of adding a bit of secondary text under the logo type to give the brand just a bit more context. This will let the consumer know just by looking at the logo that this is 1, a cheese product, and 2, it is a vegan product as well, which I think is important. And as you can see here, another element that I wanted to add to the main logo is create this arch that kind of dips in the middle and expands on either side on the outsides. So the idea I've got with this is to create a subtle stretch or a pull effect, which I think adds to the feeling of cheese and it brings a bit more spice to the logo. I really like what that sort of stretch effect has done to the logo. It adds a bit more character to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is put this sort of secondary text underneath the logo. And I'm going to use Obviously as the font, which is probably one of my favourite sans serif fonts. It's by Onotype. They've got a bunch of really cool fonts, so definitely go check them out. So I'm basically using the arch as a guideline to give the secondary text an arch as well. So I'm just going to go and create this line with the pen tool and arch it in parallel to the actual arch of the logo itself. So I've just finished up experimenting with the main logo, and yeah, I'm super happy with how this is turning out so far. I've sort of done a couple of different variations of it depending on what the company wants to use it for in certain contexts, including one with an outline which will be useful in certain colour combinations and colour contexts as well. So the next thing to do is to get on with the submark, which I'm super excited for. This should be a bit easier because I'm just going to take the C from the word cheddar and use that, and I want to make this little sort of cute, fun character that loves a bit of vegan cheese. So let's get to that now. This is a really cool example of how you can take stuff that you've already made and make it into a new thing, but it'll still be relevant to the brand that you've already made. So I've taken, like I said, the crescent sort of moon shapes that can resemble sort of wheels of cheese and created an eye in the actual C of the logo type that I made in Procreate. Which turned out to be a little cool character for the brand. And this definitely adds a real fun element to the brand, and as a submark this can be used to represent the brand across social platforms as well as on packaging and marketing collateral. So now we're getting into the real juicy part of this brand identity, and I'm doing away with the black and the grey as I'm now starting to apply the colour palette that I've chosen. I definitely advise you to don't overdo it with the colours. I definitely wouldn't have more than 5 colours as this is just too complicated and it may make the branding look too busy and confused. So one of my favourite parts of making any brand is making the patterns. So that's what I'm going to turn my attention to now. Well, I'm going to do 2 patterns which will be made from the flat submark as well as the one with a bit of depth to it. This will allow me to utilise the colour palette a bit more as well. One of the points from the brief was that the business wanted me to play on the public perception of vegan cheese and try and make fun of it. So I'm going to try my best to do that with some stickers. And I've got a few phrases written down that I think will work here. I personally think that out of all the veganized products that have been made, it's safe to say that cheese has the worst rap of them all. As a vegan, I know that a lot of these cheeses are awful in terms of taste, texture, and the way they melt. And trust me, I've had my fair share of vegan cheese. And companies have struggled to make a product that replicates that of real cheese, which includes the way it melts, and now ultimately that is where vegan cheese fails the most. So, for the sake of this video, let's just imagine that this company have made a revolutionary vegan cheese, where it is almost identical in all departments to real cheese. So the stickers are done, and the final thing to do, and arguably the most fun thing to do, is to create the packaging. And I've been tasked to create the packaging for their first cheese product, which is this cheddar grated cheese. And I can't stress how important mock-ups are in both a personal project and a real client project. Mock-ups support your thesis in a real world setting. So sometimes you may create something that looks great, but it also needs to serve its purpose. They are usually a very effective way of showing clients and potential clients what their brand can look like in the real world. So the mock-up I'm using for this cheese packaging is a pretty good one. There definitely is good and bad mock-up templates, and you might associate the bad ones with also being free, but that isn't always the case, as I've found many great mock-ups that are free, but for this mock-up in particular I purchased it from Yellow Images. Now the good thing about buying mock-ups is that not only are you supporting a fellow creative, but you can then build up your own library of mock-ups that you can use for every project. Now in all honesty, it's maybe not likely that I'll use this cheese mock-up again, but with mock-ups like business cards, posters, etc., you are likely to use these a lot, and you are only going to need one that you can go to for every project. The cool thing about this mock-up though is that I can remove the cheese and maybe replace it with something else, so that's something you may not get built in with a free mock-up. So I have these two variations of the packaging, which I quite like. They're quite simple, they're not too sort of chaotic or anything like that, but I do want to add in this third one, which is going to utilize a little bit of a variation on the color palette, and I also want it to incorporate the stickers that I made. So this one's going to be a bit more different just because it's really going balls to the wall with the playfulness and the sort of character, and all the stickers that I made are going to go on it and they're going to be scattered around, which I think is going to be quite eye-catching, but obviously this is not going to be to everyone's taste, and I could just leave the stickers out for other sort of marketing materials. But I thought I'd just sort of make this one as a bit of a wild card, which is quite different to the other two, and it incorporates a lot of the assets that I've sort of already made. So the packaging is now finished, and so is the branding process for this project. I'll leave it up to you guys to decide if I've met the brief or not, but I hope that I've done the branding some justice. So yeah, let's have a look. So that is the branding process complete. I've had an absolute blast turning this mock brief into a really cool concept. Let me know what you guys think of it in the comment section below. And if you're new to design or branding in general, then I hope this has helped in some way. Now, if this kind of content is something you'd like to see more of, then please let me know in the comments as well, because I've had a really cool time putting all this together. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like, comment and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I will see you in a bit.